And it looks like we are live. Hello, everyone. This is My Two Cents, and welcome to the November Patrons Hangout number 1. Unfortunately, so far, none of my patrons have joined this stream, so I'm just going to sit here and talk to myself for the time being. It's rather unfortunate, but I've been really having trouble finding a time of day throughout the week that all my patrons can make it to these streams. So this time, I'm just going to start the stream. I'm going to let it run probably a little longer than usual. Those that show up, great. Those that don't, well, it's unfortunate, but it happens. Never going to find a time when everybody can stream. So I'm going to let this go for a little while. And I guess if nobody shows up for a substantial amount of time, might just end it and reschedule, but we'll see. I see we have 2 viewers at the moment, so hello to you. If y'all want to talk in the chats, I will respond. I have nothing else to do right now. Hello to Deserted and Pedro Villalon. Thank you for joining the stream. Deserted says he has a devil's advocate. Pedro says, how was Halloween? Well, I'll be honest, I really didn't do much for Halloween. I handed out candy. I honestly can't remember the last time I wore a Halloween costume. It's probably when I was in high school. Pedro says, I saw the new Terminator and it was blah. Well, I totally believe that. I've heard nothing but bad things about the new Terminator. Which is really a shame. Terminator was an awesome movie, especially Terminator 2, the original. Well, obviously not the original, but the original Terminator 2 was an amazing movie. I always thought the mechanics of time travel in that series didn't make any sense. Well, I mean, eventually it made sense, but so time essentially can't be altered because Skynet sends a Terminator back in time to kill Sarah Connor so that John Connor can't be born. But in doing so, it ensures that the human resistance sends Kyle Reese back in time to save Sarah Connor, which in fact ensures John Connor's existence because Kyle Reese and Sarah Connor do it, creating John Connor. So it's from like a deterministic standpoint. Time travel is possible, but altering history isn't. Except when this whole new Terminator Genesis timeline comes around, I guess as it turns out, you really can alter the timeline because that was the whole point of that one. But yeah, they're grasping at straws at this point. I did not like Terminator Genesis. I have no reason to think that this new one's going to be any good. Tinseltown Queen, thanks for joining us. Okay, Deserted has a devil's advocate. He says, how is the rent of a landlord different from the taxes of the state? You can leave a state as much as you can leave a rented property. Well, the difference is, were you born into the rented property or did you enter into a contract with that landlord? In the case of the landlord, there is an explicit contract which is signed by the user, and if and when the user has a child and the child inherits the property, the landlord would have to renew the contract with the child. That is, in the case of a state, the state forces the contract upon all the children that are born. So that is the difference. There's in the case of a landlord who's renting property to you, you voluntarily enter into that agreement, and there is an explicit contract which you sign. Not so with the state. And of course, then, when it comes to the issue of passing it down to the children after the death of the original owner, the landlord must renew the contract with the child. I don't know if I've ever done a stream like this before where it's just me. Like I said, we'll wait and see if anybody shows up, but something new. According to this, we got 6 people watching so far. Deserted, Pedro, and Tinseltown Queen in the chat. How's everybody's week? I know in my case, my life has gotten fairly busy over the past couple of months. Looking forward to the holiday season. It should slow down a little bit. Trying to decide what I'm going to do for this week's video. There was a lot that possibly to talk about. I really do want to do a video called Emma Watson's Feminist Fail based on her whole comments about how she's self-partnered this week. But there's also the matter of the Trumpian economy and all the mindless praise it keeps getting from the diehard Trump supporters. I always have, and then I got to get back to the defending traditional marriage series and do my video on private marriage contracts. So a lot going on. Plus, I need to update my channel art. I will never use Kate Upton in my channel art again ever since her recent feminist streak on Twitter. Cody Ferret says, my 2 cents. Do you remember when Nate, Night Shift, and you on one of your patron hangouts? Yes, I do remember you. I don't remember specifically what your comments were, but I remember you were there. Night Shift originally said he was going to be here, but then he had, I guess, an emergency come up with his job, so he may or may not make it later. So we got 8 viewers now. I should also take this opportunity to talk about this. I'm probably gonna make a formal video announcement about this, but I'm sure, as many of you may have seen, YouTube has again updated their terms of service, and now it states explicitly in their terms of service they may get rid of your channel if it is not commercially viable, whatever that means. I thank YouTube for at least being honest. I think they're more or less admitting that they can. It's in their terms of service. They can kick you off for any reason now. I mean, commercially viable, that's pretty much a catch-all. But YouTube's really disappointing in that it's moved away from what it was originally meant to be. YouTube was a platform where independent content creators, the rank and file individual, anybody could just create a channel and put their content on the web for people to see. YouTube has moved away from that. Now they want to be like a mainstream news network. The algorithm only prioritizes CNN, Fox News, MSNBC, these other mainstream outlets. They're paying well-known Hollywood celebrities like The Rock, Will Smith, and others to make channels and start putting up video content. You know, the kind of people you see when you go to the theater or watch mainstream networks, not the independent content creator types. And for that reason, I'm going to start focusing a lot more heavily on BitTubers and BitChute. So if you have not yet, please, by all means, subscribe to me on both those platforms.
Hello, hello, hello.
DarkCon, hello. Thanks for joining.
Glad to be here. And might I just say to everybody right now that I am officially a hardcore ANCAP, even though I believe in public sector, government-ran military, police, and courts. I am a hardcore ANCAP now.
For those of you who do not know, the last video that I mirrored for the Dark Conservatarian resulted in the person he was responding to accusing him of being an ANCAP, specifically because his video was mirrored on my channel.
I don't know if it's specifically that, because in the video he said that Tim Horn said that he had viewed my Twitter, and he said apparently by the looks of this guy, he is a hardcore ANCAP. And then he just later, after he had he had uploaded his video, and then in the comment section underneath this video, he's debating some of my subscribers, which God bless them for being such loyal subscribers in that way. But yeah, somebody said DarkCon is not an ANCAP. And then Tim Horn was all like, yes, he is, and it's not debatable, especially when his ANCAP buddies go mirroring his video. Do not deny reality. Apparently, saying that I am what I am actually not is not debatable. Apparently.
Yeah, apparently not. Well, let's face it. He's a leftist. He'll say what he thinks, and when shown to be wrong, he'll deny till he dies.
Yep. And, oh man, I haven't watched the entire video myself, but about 20, 30 minutes in, and I've like skipped through a few other points in the video, and apparently that seems to be his favorite saying is "It's not debatable." Like this guy just, oh man. Like I've seen some arrogant players in the whole in the game of politics here on the internet, but that is just next level right there. I mean, yeah, we can say that some issues are not debatable, but you're saying that healthcare is not debatable, and you're even going so far to say that somebody, the political title of what somebody is when they're actually something else is not debatable. That's really pathetic right there. Like, how much of a fragile ego he has, I wonder, for him to say that me being an ANCAP, even though I clearly am not, is not debatable.
And I'm just going to say to Kimmy Mora Del Curran, there is nothing wrong with being an ANCAP. Darkcon is not saying ANCAPs are weak. He is making fun of Tim Horn for accusing him of being an ANCAP, even though he is not. To all those watching, yes, I am an ANCAP. Darkcon is not, just because he is a minarchist, I guess conservatarian, as he puts it. Even though he and I may disagree on some things, doesn't mean he is not my friend, and I can't have a reasonable conversation with him. So,
yeah, if you're saying that I am like an ANCAP because some other ANCAP like mirrored one of my videos, that is clear guilt by association right there. And by the way, that's a fallacy. In case you don't know, Tim Horn.
Yes, a Tinseltown Queen mentions, at least you're a hardcore ANCAP, not a weak sauce ANCAP.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, there is some that I don't know. I've been like thinking within the past few weeks about the whole title of being a libertarian. I mean, people like go debating me so much on whether or not I am a libertarian and what is true libertarian or whatever. And I'm almost getting to the point that maybe I should just drop being called and insisted being called somewhat of a libertarian, but and just to go with the title conservatarian, even though that title has not fully caught on yet. There's some other channels that have like got on that have claimed that title. Like there's a channel called Conservatarian Curator, obviously said in his name, and what's the guy's name? Wolfchild or dang it, I can't remember what. He's on Twitter a whole lot. I've talked to him like before. Christ's Wolf Dog, that's what he is. He's a self-proclaimed or conservatarian, anyways, as well. And the way that I would say that a conservatarian is different from conservatives is that they're more libertarian when it comes to sex and drug rights and wars as well, I would say, and other stuff like that. But they disagree with libertarians on how to approach abortion, whatnot.
Okay. Well, I mean, there are quite a few terms out there being used, and I should mention, rip to Postal Cat, who chose to delete his YouTube channel. He asked me to announce his retirement on Twitter. He is still on BitChute, but one of the reasons he's stopping with YouTube for two reasons. One, he can't stand all the infighting in the libertarian community, and two, he said he just doesn't enjoy it anymore. And I will say, let me be clear, I have no intentions of ending my YouTube channel. I am an ANCAP, although I do have many traditional values. I just don't believe that those values should be forced on the population through government. But I will say I do get frustrated with a lot of the infighting that takes place in the libertarian community. So I certainly sympathize with Postal Cat's concern there.
Yep. And good on you, by the way, my 2 cents, because you're like one. Actually, I will not say one of the least, but just the least drama involved ANCAP in the ANCAP community. I can say for right now, anyways.
Well, thank you very much. I appreciate that, and I take pride in that. The way I see my channel is about the ideas I talk about in my videos. If you think I'm wrong, you are welcome to explain why. If you think I'm a horrible person, frankly, I don't care. And if you have a personal beef with someone else who happens to be a regular viewer or a patron of mine or something, work it out with someone else. I do not get involved in other people's disputes unless it directly involves me. So,
Right.
and another thing that I really can't stand, just because I may have very strong disagreements with someone doesn't mean I can't be cordial with them or have a conversation with them. That's one other thing that just annoys the tar out of me. The idea that if you have someone on a live stream on your channel, that means you endorse everything they've ever said, or you're not a real libertarian because you had a conversation with this dude. Give me a break. Just because I'm having a conversation with someone about an idea, hopefully so that we can all, learn more, and think about our own ideas better. Somehow that means I endorse everything they've ever said or done, which is ridiculous.
Yeah. And apparently there's according to S-Man, in one of his last episodes of S-Man Live, and he's not continuing that live show anymore. Rest in peace. But in one of his later episodes in the 90s, 95 or something like that, he was talking about of how that there was some politician running for office, and he ended up arriving on like some white supremacist podcast or something. I think it might have been mostly by accident, like he did not know the reputation of that podcaster or whatever. But yeah, I think S-Man was like making the comment of people are going to play some guilt by association with that. Yeah, and so on and so forth. By the way, have you been? You obviously have been seeing Mark Dice's hot take when it comes to adoption, right?
I did. I looked this morning when I saw your tweet, actually. I looked back through that thread and read a number of the back and forths. And Mark Dice essentially is taking the conservative Christian position that because same-sex couples do not provide the same benefits to children that a mother and a father do, they should the force of government should be used to prevent them from adopting children. Correct? Or is that not his position?
It seems to be like heavily implied, anyways, by Mark Dice's on Mark Dice's part. But Freedom Tunes was a little less implied, but it still has me on edge about what his real position is. I actually what?
I didn't actually see Freedom Tunes in there. What was he saying?
Hold on. Let me pull it up again. I actually made a quick video on it. Like, it's not even 9 minutes, or actually, I don't know. It might be around 90 minutes, but I'd gone talking about that, and let me just see if I can like find it again through my notifications and whatnot. Where is it? Okay, here we go. Let me just screen share this.
All right.
Screen to allow, and okay, there it is. If you want to like click on that and whatnot.
Okay, yeah, I see your screen there. Let's get it up.
But yeah, Mark Dice says, no wonder the Zoomers Generation Z kids are rising up and denouncing Charlie Kirk and Turning Point USA, which that's kind of a thing that is off-putting for me, because apparently I'm seeing some polls that Generation Z is slowly becoming less approving of homosexuality. I would have to actually read into those articles. I only saw the titles, but whatever. What kind of a Christian supports same-sex couples adopting children? So he's just being... Even if he like is not supporting of the idea of like a government getting involved in just banning gays from adopting foster kids, well, it's still like, why are you being critical about this? Like, what kind of a Christian supports same-sex couples adopting children? How about a Christian that does not want foster kids like staying in the foster kids all their damn life? And then here's Freedom Tune saying, agreed, I'm all for hands off government, but... And that's kind of where it's implied there. But children need a mother and a father. To intentionally deprive them of that is abuse. So it was very disappointing. And I didn't even realize that I was like responding to Freedom Tunes, like which is kind of maybe a dumbass thinking of me. I did not realize I was responding to Freedom Tunes. But as soon as I had posted it, I was like, oh, that's Freedom Tunes. And I said, that's a straw man. There's no intent by the pro-LGBT liberties crowd to deprive foster kids from being adopted by hetero couples. Nobody's saying ban hetero couples from adopting. Just allow LGBT couples to adopt as well.
Okay.
Simple as.
Okay, I guess reading through those tweets, I don't get where was Mark Dice saying that that heterosexual couples should not be allowed to adopt, or is that what he said Charlie Kirk was saying, or what was the origin of that?
No, to intentionally deprive them, the kids, of having a mother and father, basically, is what
okay.
was saying. And then I was all like, that's a straw man. Nobody is like intentionally depriving a mother and a father, aka a straight couple, from adopting kids. Nobody is advocating for a law saying, yeah, let's ban the heteros from adopting. I mean, it's just...
Okay, I actually, based on my experience with the conservative Christian argument, I don't think, it may sound like that's what Freedom Tunes was saying. I don't think that's what he was actually implying. I think what he's trying to say is that by allowing a same-sex couple to adopt a child, you are preventing that child from being, if you denied the same-sex couple, potentially that child would be adopted by a heterosexual couple, in which case, by allowing the same-sex couple to by allowing the same-sex couple to adopt the child, you are thereby depriving the child of a mother and a father. I think that's the argument he's trying to make.
Yeah, I don't quite see it as that way, though. Like, I think you're not deciding for yourself of who the kid is to be adopted by. So it's not like you're causing the deprivation. If anything, it'd be more of who's deciding to adopt them, who is depriving them of this, that, or the other thing. In this case, what kind of parents the kid is to have, you know?
Okay. All right. Well, I want to say for the record, I actually agree with Freedom Tunes and Mark Dice that I don't think same-sex couples are capable of providing the same benefits to a child that a mother and a father are. However, I agree with that principle. However, I don't agree that the government should therefore use force to ensure that same-sex couples do not adopt children. I think it should be up to private adoption agencies to decide who they're going to allow to adopt. If a Catholic adoption agency says we do not allow same-sex couples to adopt the children in our orphanages, then they should have the freedom to do that. If a secular organization wants to allow same-sex couples to adopt, then they have the freedom to do that. And to all those, and again, I happen to agree, it is my opinion that I don't think same-sex couples can raise a child in the same fashion. But my challenge to all those that say, well, therefore, the government needs to step in, is what logical argument can you give then when a leftist takes control of the government and says that teaching conservative Christian values to children is abusive, and it should be the job of the government to take children from conservative Christian homes and protect them from this abuse? What consistent argument can you give for why they're unjustified in doing that, but you're justified in using force to stop same-sex couples from adopting?
My thought... Well, yeah, I agree with that. And Charlie Kirk, that's more or less Charlie Kirk's philosophy as well, because he thinks that preferably it would be best if like straight couples were the ones raising kids. But at the same time, he was saying he doesn't think that the government should be involved in that. And I overall agree with that too. But at the same time, I find it more preferable that gay people, that if a child was to be adopted by a gay couple, than if they were to not be adopted at all. This is my thinking. And so therefore, I would, despite how much I would prefer it to be like a hetero couple, I would still encourage more gay people, more LGBT people to adopt, just to like thin out the foster kid population, just to make it so that less kids are in the foster system.
Okay. You know, here's something I would be interested to see. Professor Mark Regeneris at the University of Texas did probably one of the most comprehensive studies on children raised by straight couples compared to children raised by same-sex couples, and I would argue the data was pretty solid. children raised by heterosexual couples statistically do far better than children raised by same-sex couples in nearly every standard of measurement. However, I would like to, I don't know if there is such a study. If somebody knows of one, I'd be happy to review it. But comparing children raised by same-sex couples compared to children raised in orphanages or raised in the foster system without ever being adopted, that is something I would be interested in seeing.
Yeah, my philosophy is that the act of adopting a child does not, that in of itself, I mean, regardless of what the sex of the parents are, the mere act of adopting a kid does not violate their rights or negatively affect them in of itself. It's what happens afterwards, the way that they're raised, that would be the negative effect. Whether or not the parents decide to like lock them in their room constantly, or be physically abusive, or whatever else, like malnourish them, that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm. And then there's the matter of we're also talking on macro scale, whereas in individual cases, you have to look at all the variables involved. I am sure there are single parents who would do a better job of raising a child than other particular couples. But just because there may be a really crappy couple that would do a horrible job of raising a child and a very superb single parent who would do a much better job of raising a child, doesn't mean you can conclude that therefore it's always better to be raised by a single parent than to be raised by a couple.
Yeah, I mean, it's generally, I haven't looked into the stats myself, but it's like a generally accepted talking point. Like, look at the stats of how that, affected the Black community and so on and so forth. Single motherhood, just fatherlessness, and that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm. I'd again point to the like Freedom Tunes and Mark Dice. My challenge is this: Richard Dawkins in The God Delusion stated that he believes teaching religion to children is child abuse. And based on everything I've heard Richard Dawkins say, I believe he is 100% wrong, but it seems to me that Richard Dawkins is genuine in his belief that teaching religion to children is child abuse. He appears, and I believe he genuinely believes that. So if Richard Dawkins thinks it's acceptable to use the force of government to stop you from teaching your children religion, and in fact to use the force of government to take your children from you, if you want to teach your children religion, then what consistent argument can you give me for why it's acceptable for you to use force to stop a same-sex couple from adopting, but it's not acceptable for the government that Dawkins advocates to use force to stop you from teaching your child religion?
Yeah, there might be some things that are like, in the long run, a negative thing to be doing with your kid and not how you're raising them and whatnot. But even if it might be negative, there is a possibility, I would say, that calling it abuse is hyperbole. Like if they're spoiling their kid, they act inappropriately and they decide to spoil them to try to get them to shut up. In the long run, that's a negative effect on the child. They're not going to learn a good lesson in discipline, but I would not necessarily call that abuse, really. Or what you teach your kids as well, teaching them the entitlement shit, that they are entitled to this, entitled to that. Just teaching them to basically be selfish, ingraining that into their mindset. I would call that bad, but abusive, not necessarily. What I would call abusive is malnourishment, constantly locking them up over nothing, basically physical abuse, or physically harming them, like beating them up and so forth. And this is kind of like something that I kind of debated with a guy called the Geoconservative on my channel one time. It was primarily about homosexuality, and he says that he believes that homosexuals should be restricted to these things called red light districts if they are to be practicing homosexuality. They cannot do that in a public street or anything else like that. They are to be forced into the red light districts if they are to be practicing homosexuality. But it got down to parenting. I emphasize that I believe in allowing gay adoption, and he thinks that just the act in of itself or the existence in of itself of gay couples adopting kids, that is that is negative right there, in of itself, a negative thing. Bad parenting or I cannot remember the exact words that he used for it, but it was bad parenting. And I was all like, how is it bad parenting? Like, what is referred to as bad parenting is a little bit subjective. Like, do you teach your kids a religion or not? Like, if for how Richard Dawkins disagrees with that, do you spank your kids or not? I mean, in geoconservative, he does believe that spankings are, to some degree, anyways, a legitimate way of parenting. And I said, well, gay people can apply spankings as well. And since we're kind of on this, I'm kind of curious, my 2 cents. Still there?
Yeah, I'm still here.
What is your opinion on on spanking? Like in particular, if we just completely abolished all government and we got ourselves an international Ancapistan. What do you think of parents spanking their kids, etc.?
Okay, this is a topic that comes up a lot, especially in discussions of how children would be protected in a libertarian society. Now, by spanking, I think one of the problems in this discussion is that people don't clearly define what they're talking about. Saying spanking means different things to different people. To some people, spanking means mercilessly beating the child's rear end with a leather belt.
Right.
Others would say it's a painful but short-lived specific act of discipline for a specific purpose.
A quick spat on the leg or the butt.
Mm-hmm. Now, what I would say is this. Of course, I believe that the initiation of force is unjust. Now, but that the use of force in self-defense is justified, or potentially there could be situations where if both parties have engaged in a voluntary contract, the use of force so perceived could be appropriate. For example, if someone is trespassing on another person's property and refuses to leave, we'll get to the subject of children quick. I'm just prefacing this so that my argument makes sense. Even though a person may be non-violent, so to speak, he's trespassing on property that he does not have permission to be on. Even if he's not being overtly violent or harmful to the people, it would still be appropriate in that case to use force to correct the violation. Now, in the case of children, I think we see nature itself shows us that there is a natural connection between children and parents. Children cannot, until such time as they reach a level of maturity that they can provide for themselves and they can demonstrate. And I would encourage everyone to look at my video about rites of passage that I did with Mag and Night Shift. I think one of the tests for adulthood. Yeah, when the test for adulthood should not be an arbitrary age, but rather when the child demonstrates that they are capable of caring for themselves without their parents. That would be a necessary precondition to show that they're capable of making their own informed decisions. Now, I think that before that point is reached, discipline is necessary. Now, personally, I think spanking, generally speaking, spanking is ineffective. It teaches children that might makes right. However, I would say a controlled act of spanking. And what I mean by that is a case where the parent is not visibly angry when it takes place. Rather, a spanking that takes place like this: son or daughter, we have rules in this household. You broke those rules. Do you understand that you broke those rules? Yeah. Do you understand why? Okay. Well, as we talked about beforehand, there are consequences when you break rules. Therefore, you're going to get a spanking. It's going to happen here. It's going to happen here, and you understand why you're getting a spanking, correct? And yes, then the child. Then the child receives a spanking. Now that I think there is a much strong. Now, even then, I'm going to say what I'm going to say is. Even then, I think there is a substantial discussion to be had about whether or not that is the most appropriate form of discipline, or whether that still reinforces negative ideas in the child's mind. But I think a form of spanking like that would be is arguably acceptable. I would say. If the parent is visibly angry, or the parent is spanking the child in the course of their disobedience so as to essentially force them to submit, no, that does not teach a child discipline. It does not teach them to respect authority. It teaches them that might makes right, which is, of course, contrary to the non-aggression principle.
Yeah. Would you think that it's justified to spank a kid if they're like beating up another? Spank your own kid more specifically if they're beating up another kid. Just you know.
Well, I would say too, the use of force is justified in self defense. So I would say if they, it's a specific punishment for them having initiated force against another child, then yes, I would still.
Yeah.
However, I would still say the parent should not be visibly angry and not using the spanking as a means to get them to submit. It has to, it must occur at a point when the child has calmed down. They've been able to have a conversation and say, "You understand why you're being punished, and this is, this is your punishment, and it's not going to happen again."
Sorry, I'm just looking at the chat and some of my new comments that are flooding in from my newest video that I uploaded. But yeah, I think that that's a case of where that spanking, and if the kid is being like absolutely unreasonable, like you cannot verbalize with them at all, just shouting and screaming, whatnot, that'd be some rather those would be some cases, in my opinion, of spanking being justified. I don't think that parents should be like overly harsh, should I say, for lack of better wording, when it comes to spanking, like not too many times.
I agree. But again, I'd say, imagine a situation where, a child is throwing a tantrum. They're yelling and screaming and crying and throwing their toys all over the room. The parent then, in anger, yells at the child, throws them over the knee, and just starts spanking them over and over again. It might get the behavior to stop, but I would say what the child will learn from that type of behavior is that might makes right. The parent effectively wins here because they're stronger and they can use force against you. I would say that is not an appropriate use of spanking. I would say the appropriate thing in that case would be if it's necessary to physically restrain the child to stop, I say physically restrain, not harm, in order to stop the behavior, fine. But then later, when the child has calmed down, you've been able to have a conversation with them, explain what they did was wrong, and then explain that you're getting a spanking as your punishment for breaking the rules. Then, and it's not done when the parent is visibly angry. That, I think, is arguably acceptable. The former, I would say, is not acceptable.
Yeah, and have you ever watched like Last Man Standing, the Tim Allen series?
Oh, yes, I have. It's hilarious.
Yeah, and
the original Mandy was smoking hot.
What? Oh,
the original Mandy was smoking hot. I think they replaced her in a later season.
I see. Yeah, in the season 2, they had Mandy replaced with some fuller-bodied babe, but she wasn't as good-looking in the face. But anyway, so why I wanted to bring up Last Man Standing is because they had like a very nuanced episode when it comes to the issue of spanking. Have you watched that one?
No, I don't think I've seen that one.
Well, basically, it takes a rather nuanced approach to the issue of spanking and whether or not it should be applied and whatnot. And Mike Baxter goes explaining as to how his dad, Bud Baxter, had to apply spankings to him and his brother because they're a couple of hellraisers, as he puts it, unreasonable hellraisers. And Mike was all like, it was understandable. And then as the generations go down the list, the form of punishment just becomes either more reasonable or more soft. Like it gets softer and softer. Like there's a point of where it's reasonably soft, reasonably harsh, but then it becomes too soft to where it is spoiling. Like Mike Baxter with when he goes disciplining his kids or his daughters more specifically, he explains that he just has to give the look to intimidate them, which is very reasonable, I'd say. And then the next generation goes down. Mandy in disciplining her own kid, along with what's his face, Ryan, I think it is. Was Ryan?
I don't know. Isn't it? Kristen's the oldest one.
Oh, you're right. Kristen is the older one. Mandy is the middle
yes.
one.
And I should say the original Kristen was hotter too, but the original Mandy lasted longer. Both the older sisters have been replaced by new actresses, but I was talking about the middle sister.
Oops, my bad. But anyway, talking about Kristen specifically, Excuse us, people. We're getting our trivia on Last Man Standing incorrect here. But Kristen, the eldest sister, the one with Boyd, who is her son, parenting him with Ryan. In their parenting, they basically go spoiling him to try to get him to behave. Not like rescinding privileges to get him to stop, but giving him more privileges or more treats to get him to stop. So it's just gotten to the point of where it's too soft. And at one point in that episode, going towards the end, they just go telling Boyd to go upstairs, and he's just all like, "No, I'm not going." And then just doing it in an overly soft tone. And then Mike Baxter just comes stomping into the room and just yells, "Boyd, get upstairs now!" And finally, he just goes up the stairs as he's all like, "What's the matter with you?" Mike Baxter says, "What's the matter with you?" And the crowd in the background of Last Man Standing goes cheering that on. Basically, yeah, I just really love the crap out of that particular episode right there. Mike Baxter is a Chad. But yeah. Actually, there's some things that I wanted to address from the chat, like Kimimura Del Kieran. I would say being a bad parent is not subjective. There is objective good and bad parenting. Yeah, I guess I do have to clarify, and this is something I had to clarify with Geoconservative as well, is that there is some objective bad parenting, like you cannot beat your kids, you cannot malnourish them, and that other kind of stuff. But I was going into the more subjective area as far as how that you are to parent your kids, like whether you teach them a religion or not, whether you should apply any sort of spankings, etc. Are you supposed to give them this kind of treatment or that kind of treatment, But yeah, there is some objective rules to parenting.
Okay. And I would say the libertarian, I think the libertarian position is, again, the initiation of force against a non-violent, peaceful person is unjustified. Spanking a child as a form of discipline for the child breaking the rules that have been articulated to them by their parent is not necessarily an initiation of force against an innocent, nonviolent person. And there's a lot, again, there's not really a cut and dry answer there. The specific circumstances of each individual case would need to be evaluated. But for that reason, I'm not willing to blanketly say spanking fundamentally is unjustified or spanking fundamentally is justified. The guiding principle is the non-aggression principle, and the specific circumstances of each individual case have to be taken into account.
I was spanked. Kimimura Del Kieran. I was spanked growing up, and I can assure you it did not ever teach me a lesson. What it did do was make me both fear and hate my stepdad. Sure, I can acknowledge this as an anecdotal example. However, at least from my experience, spanking was not ever an efficient form of punishment for me growing up. It didn't work.
Okay, well, the question I would ask him is, when you were spanked, what was the manner in which it happened? Was your stepfather visibly angry, and was it a show of force to essentially scare you into submission? Or did he sit you down? Did you have a conversation about what you'd done wrong? And did you understand why what you'd done wrong was wrong, and that this was your punishment, and that he wasn't doing it out of any kind of sadistic pleasure he got? Because I would say those kind of details are effectively what makes the difference between whether it's an effective punishment or whether it's an abusive practice that's going to have negative effects on the child.
Yeah, did he give you 20, 30 spankings just for stealing a cookie out of the cookie jar? Or he just, yeah, it's something petty like that.
Exactly, and it wasn't. Was it effectively beating you into submission, or was it a calm but firm act of discipline after explaining to you what you'd done wrong?
Since we're on this issue of parenting, one bit of philosophy that really turned me off from that guy T is that he brought up the argument. This is during his debate against the vegan OG Maizen. I think he might have privated that debate or something. But in that debate, he said that he views children as property of the parents. And that just, to me, came off as a very, I'm not going to curse, but effed up logic. Because with that kind of logic, then it would not be I mean, if that were true, let's accept that as a fact, that children are basically their own parents' property. That would mean that pedophilia is legitimate. And now I have to take another shower for ever uttering those words. So basically, I'm just all like, no, screw you, that guy T. That's.
I would say absolutely not. Children are not their parents' property. What I would say is what I would say the best analogy I've given is parents are the trusted owner of children until they are adults. And now what I mean by that is, let's imagine I'm an investor. Yes, I'm an investor. I go to a private financial firm, pay a fee to have a financial advisor, and I tell the financial advisor, I am giving you the authority to manage my assets with the expectation that you are going to do so to my benefit. And although you have the authority to manage my assets, they are still my assets, and I will hold you accountable for any negative things that happen to my assets. So in the same way, children are, again, I need to be clear, children are not their parents' property. Granted, there are similarities in as much as, because until children reach a certain stage of maturity, they are not capable of making their own decisions in many respects, and that capacity grows until they reach a point of adulthood. But again, parents are trusted owners in that for the time being, they have authority that is in many ways similar to the authority between a property owner and the piece of property, but they do not have free reign to do anything they want with it, because it is not theirs as it would be a private investor investing his own money compared to a financial advisor investing the money of an investor with that investor's permission.
Yeah, I kind of look at it as parenting as a form of stewardship. Like, you're a steward of this property, well, okay, kids are not property. Let me just put it that way. But take a fictional example, a fictional movie, for example, Lord of the Rings. I mean, I'm sure that there are real life examples as well, but this is one that I know specifically. Denethor, who is like basically the Lord of Gondor, of Minas Tirith. He was just steward. He wasn't king. It wasn't his kingdom. He was just running it. Well, it was actually technically in the official, I guess, for lack of better wording, ownership of the Aragorn and Arathorn bloodline. And in the same case of kids, you do not own the kids. They basically own themselves. You are just running that being, like helping to guide them and so forth. You don't
Pipsqueak, hello.
You don't own them to where you can do whatever the F that you want with them. Yeah, sorry. Hello, Captain Pipsqueak.
Good afternoon, gentlemen.
Oh, yes. Good afternoon in Australia. It's late here, but early for him. How are things down under?
Yeah, fairly well.
All right. I don't know how much you caught of that conversation, but we're actually having a conversation about children's rights and the role of parenting from a libertarian as opposed to a conservative perspective. So.
Yeah. Yeah, mainly caught the tail end of that. So.
Okay. But yes, Darkon, I think that's basically what I was trying to say with the trusted owner analogy. Children are self-owners, but because they currently lack the capacity to function as a self-owner, the parent is the trusted owner, making certain decisions and exercising certain authority for the child's good until such time as they reach a level of maturity that they can do that for themselves.
Yeah.
And incidentally, I think the same would be true. A question is often brought up, what about the mentally handicapped or the severely mentally handicapped? I do believe the mentally handicapped are self-owners, but again, because unfortunately their medical conditions mean they may never reach a state of maturity where they are capable of functioning as a self-owner. Another responsible human being can become a trusted owner, so to speak. They do not have the freedom to treat the mentally handicapped individual simply as a piece of property, but must act in that individual's, by assuming that responsibility, they must act in that individual's own interest because of the fact that that individual is unable to do so themselves.
Sorry, I'm scrolling through some things, but yep. I'm overall agreeing with what you're saying. My 2 cents. There's just some other philosophies that I heard espoused about parenting that kind of just made me like, I don't know, kind of turn me off a bit.
Well,
like
I know,
that
especially
tea,
in
for example.
Especially in libertarian circles, everybody picks on Murray Rothbard, and appropriately so, I think, because Rothbard was a great libertarian thinker, but I have to be honest, I think a lot of the stuff he said about children was pretty screwed up. In that he believed parents did have, at least for I'm actually starting to get a pipsqueak. It's Rothbard who said that he believed parents could justly abandon their children, correct? Or am I misremembering that?
I'm not sure.
Okay, I am pretty... I will have to double check my sources, but I'm fairly certain it was specifically Rothbard argued that from a libertarian perspective, parents are justified in abandoning their children or effectively or allowing their children to starve to death because they're not. He would say a parent is unjustified in beating their child to death, but a parent would not be unjustified in allowing their child to starve because there's no explicit initiation of force in that case. And I would have to say, I believe that's pretty screwed up. By having a child and not giving that child up for adoption, you have assumed the responsibility of caring for that child, and therefore, in failing to your responsibility to care for the child would be the same as if you failed to live up to the responsibilities of an explicit contract.
Yeah, you can't. I would describe it as you can't essentially abandon your custodianship of a dependent.
Exactly. Unless someone else voluntarily chose to assume those responsibilities, then you could not
that would simply be a transferal of custodianship.
Exactly.
I wouldn't describe that as an abandonment.
Mm-hmm. So, and I would argue in an anarcho-capitalist society, if a parent was allowing their child to starve, at that point you would be justified in using the amount of force necessary to rescue the child from that situation. And obviously, the individual circumstance would have to determine what that level of force would be. But
effectively, that would be homesteading the custodianship. That sort of makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
Kimmy Mora Delcrin says parents are guardians. That's how I would phrase it. And yeah, I think that's appropriate. Guardian, trusted owner, whatever term you want to use.
Personally, I would use custodian because there are certain things that you can assume. So let me start again. There are certain rules you can lay down for your child because it is assumed you are acting in their best interest, but there are certain duties and responsibilities you have as a custodian to ensure that child grows up healthy.
Mm-hmm.
By the way, just out of curiosity, what do you all think of that guy T? Like, he's been pretty inactive in the recent 2 years, and especially in comparison to 2015 through 17.
Honestly, yes, the last I saw of that guy T was the debate on what's the guy's channel? Shane Killian was on it too, along with the alternative hypothesis and someone else. What's it? Andy Worski. Andy Worski. The last I saw of that guy T was the debate he did with Shane Killian, the alternative hypothesis, and one other guy on Andy Worski's podcast. I have not seen a single piece of that guy T content since.
I was like subscribed to him for a little while. Actually, he was like the first guy that introduced me to the idea of anarcho-capitalism. It kind of intrigued me at first, like talking about private roads and all that other kind of stuff. Of course, there are like still my prevailing issues nowadays regarding anarcho-capitalism. No offense, y'all, but But even
No,
then, I was
we've
like,
had those. For those watching who are unfamiliar, Darkon and us and myself and other ANCAPs who are my patrons have had these conversations before. I do disagree with him, but we're not going to rehash that here. So
yeah. Although I would say that between you and I haven't like fully fleshed it out. I've probably fleshed it out a little bit more with Esoteric the Free when I had him on my channel a while back. More than between you and me. But that aside, yeah, I was still like subscribed to that guy T for the longest time because he was very charismatic, a cool cat, and just I liked what he said and all that other good stuff. But it was just when he like had the debate with OG Meeson, like it's one thing for him to like be, I don't know, converting to like veganism, like not just to like taking up the vegan diet, but also to be agreeing with the vegan philosophy when it comes to like morality with animals and so forth. But it was really disappointing to hear him like saying that kids are their own parents' property. That's what kind of drove me to like unsubscribe from him. Also because of all the inactivity and so forth.
okay, yeah. I mean, I really can't comment just because I don't know anything about where he's at now. I know there are, from Esoteric the Free has said he kind of drifted over towards the alt-right, or I think he was arguing for what's called anarcho-fascism for a while there.
Libertarian fascism.
Yes, but I never saw any content where he really thoroughly explained his position on that, so I'm not in a position to judge where he's at.
Yeah, he made a video about it, and it did not get received too well. I mean, the dislikes don't outnumber the likes yet, I don't think, but it's still like a higher ratio than what he typically gets with his videos. Like when he did a response video to The Amazing Atheist and Jacqueline Glenn, like those are probably the videos that really got me to originally subscribe to him. Especially the Jacqueline Glenn video. Like he explains that he's an atheist, yet he still believes that Christians should be allowed basically to deny whatever benefits or pick and choose as to what benefits they want to give to their employees when in running a business. And I hadn't come across that kind of gray nuance yet until like delving into these parts of the internet. And he was like one of those gray areas when it comes to politics on the internet. And so that was like, it kind of warmed my heart at first. They're like, hey, here's an atheist that actually agrees with me on this issue, maybe in a little bit of a different approach than how I would come to it, but still ultimately, yeah, I'm glad that you and I agree.
Days Pipsqueak, do you have any thoughts on, or do you have more thorough insight into that guy T, or?
Honestly, no, not a lot. I don't think I've watched any of his content.
Okay, yep. So I guess we're in the same boat there. I will say the Amazing Atheist, Jacqueline Glenn. I've seen some of their. I know the Amazing Atheist is pretty from his Twitter. At least he's pretty on the leftist political side. He's very much in favor of a strong state that uses force to stomp out religion. Jacqueline Glenn, I've seen some of her videos, but all of them are specifically criticizing particular religious viewpoints and not political arguments. So I'm not sure where she's coming from. I would presume it's probably more of a political philosophy in line with the Amazing Atheist, but I can't be sure. Okay. The one I know, one of Jacqueline Glenn's most famous videos is the one where she makes the argument that Jesus never existed and his existence is in fact based on earlier pagan myths, which is frankly nonsense to anyone who's actually studied history. But in her video, nonetheless, got tons and tons of positive feedback.
What was I gonna say? I don't know. I guess if we're like kind of winding down on the serious conversation, I've been like working on my comic project, and it just got me to thinking about Jupiter Rising. Like, have you guys ever seen that movie?
Jupiter Ascending?
Jupiter Ascending, yeah.
With Mila Kunis and Channing Tatum, yes, I've seen it.
Yeah, what do you guys think of that movie right there?
I thought it was reasonably entertaining. I mean, not really great. Nothing I would say you absolutely have to see this movie, but at the same time, if you got nothing better to do, I see no reason not to watch it and enjoy it. I don't know. Pipsqueak, have you seen it?
Which movie was this again?
Jupiter Ascending with Mila Kunis and Channing Tatum.
No, I can't say I've seen it.
Okay. For those who haven't, and if Darkon, if you want to add anything, by all means do. But effectively, the premise is that Earth is in fact one of many planets throughout the universe that was seeded by an alien race, a highly advanced alien race that effectively seeds planets with life, waits until with human life, waits until the planet reaches max population, and then murders everyone on the planet and uses their DNA to create this mojo that is effectively the fountain of youth. All the members of the race take it, and so long as they take it, their youth returns and they live forever. As it happens, Earth is about to reach the pinnacle, but as it turns out, Mila Kunis is an exact genetic copy of a queen in this alien race, and as such, she discovers she is the true owner. She's the true owner of the Earth and saves Earth from certain destruction by ascending, hence the title, to the role of owner of the Earth.
I overall liked the movie. It was like it had a nice premise. Like it had some nice concepts in it, but what's the word I'm looking for? It misused, for lack of better wording, those concepts right there. Like it had the potential to be something great, but dang it. Sorry. It was overall an entertaining movie, though. Like it had some great action, great concepts, as I said. It had an epic scale to it, but it just did not know what it wanted to be. It seems the movie did. Like first off, it was about royal bloods and this one simple Earthling that was going to become like I can't remember what the titles are. Basically, like this queen of her own sector of the universe or whatever. And then it like became about a conspiracy or whatever, about how these immortals, like how they stay immortal and so forth. But then they completely drop that concept. Like they don't continue on it after the attempted wedding that they tried to get her married in with one of the other immortals or whatever they're officially called.
Yeah, I thought, like most sci-fi thought jerkers, if you will, it had a lot of material in there. What is the meaning of life? What does it mean to be human? What is immortality? And is an immortal life superior to a mortal life? They explored a lot of that, but I thought they didn't really go deep into it. So it was at best good sci-fi, entertaining kind of movie, but just not my favorite.
By the way, there's like a question in the chat for you from Lights473. I did not know how much longer you wanted to go on 2 cents.
Okay, I'm willing to allow this one to go a little bit over. Let's see what's... My 2 cents, this is completely off topic, but how do I respond to someone who says regulations are good if it prevents companies from polluting lakes and rivers and oceans? Okay, the pollution question. The answer, the question of pollution in a libertarian society is basically this. You would have in a libertarian society, you would have the freedom to pollute your own property, but polluting someone else's property would be a violation of the non-aggression principle. So when someone says regulations are good because it prevents companies from polluting lakes, rivers, and oceans, well, if someone is polluting lakes, rivers, and oceans, that would obviously the question would be whose rights are being violated in doing so. Well, if the person is polluting a lake, a river, or an ocean that they are not the private property owner of, but in fact someone else is the private property owner of, or well unowned is made use of by other people, then those people would obviously be able to take them to a private court for initiation of force against their private property or against their private enterprise, well, whatever the case may be. So I would argue that free market competition gives businesses a direct incentive not to create such pollution that harms other people's way of life. And I think one of the things to note is that when you compare nations with different levels of economic freedom, a nation's environmental score, in other words, the level of pollution and other environmental factors that they have, their environmental score actually goes up the more economically free a country is, goes down the more economically restricted a country is. And you need only look at the pollution problems that existed in the Soviet Union. I mean, the Black Sea is effectively toxic today because of the Soviet Union compared to a more free market nation like the United States or other Western nations, shows that it is not that the free market, in fact, prevents pollution from taking place, but economic control in China today, very economically restricted. They have some of the worst pollution problems. So it is, in fact, government that does the lack of government incentive that leads to pollution. It is not government regulations that end pollution.
I would. Okay. I wasn't listening to the whole argument, so forgive me on that if it seems like I'm just completely dismissing what you're saying. But I would say personally that there is somewhat of a reason to say that regulating that people should not just dump whatever the heck that they want in a waterway, because the trouble with a waterway is that it's hard to discern like who is property owner. Like, if you are like the sole owner of the whole body of water, well then obviously it's your own property and you have full rights over it. But if like you just own one segment of a river and your neighbors like own their own segments of a river or whatever, it's hard to like do whatever you want with your river without it like directly affecting other people's bit of water too.
Well, hang on. I think we have a solution to that. It's just a river is essentially a resource of water. So people downstream would pay people upstream for continued flow of water, and people downstream would charge people upstream for things like pollution.
But in my hypothetical, the people upstream are not the sole owner of the entire river.
Mm-hmm. But I think the point Pipsqueak is making is they're not the sole owner of the entire river, but even if the river in some abstract sense is unowned, it's impossible for the pollution into the river not to directly impact someone else's property, whether it's their physical body and that they...
Yeah, if you're downstream of a river and you live on the side of a lake that this river feeds into, and your business is managing fish and fishing and selling that produce on the market, I think you would have a claim that if someone upstream started putting pollutants in, you would have a claim to start charging them for that, because that is directly impacting your business on that lake. It's causing ecological damage in terms of the fish population, which is directly costing you money, because that means you can't take as many fish out of the lake, otherwise you're just going to overfish.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
The next question I see there, or I guess Darkon, did you have anything more to say on that?
No, not really. You can go on. I would have to like re-listen to that to get the full context, but go on.
Okay. Next question was thoughts on Nick Fuentes and Groyper Wars. I'd love if you can make a video on it. Again, I'm going to have to claim ignorance there. I know who Nick Fuentes is. I haven't watched very much of his content, and certainly nothing recently, so I don't know what you're talking about.
I have no idea who Nick Fuentes is.
Okay, I'm pretty I've only seen a few clips of him. I'm pretty sure he's more on the alt-right, ethno-nationalist side of things. But aside from, and don't quote me on that, I know very little about him, and like I said, I haven't seen a lot of his content. If you want to send me a link on Twitter, I'll take a look at it. Not making any promises.
Yeah, Nick Fuentes, I don't like that guy at all. Ever since the first moment that I saw a clip of him being played in a Bearing video, like the guy said, maybe there's something to the conservatism of Muslim countries. When Theron Meyer was talking about them like executing gay people and so forth, like, dude, you make people on the right look bad. Shut up.
Okay, so would you concur he's more on the alt-right ethno-nationalist side, or?
I don't know what his exact opinions are on race, but if there's like a a homosexual belief on alt-right, like an anti-homosexual belief on an alt-rightism, well, then I'd say yeah.
Okay, and that I really can't. I'm not sure there's a canonical, so to speak, position on that within the alt-right. I know many alt-righters would say yes, execute homosexuals because, homosexuals don't reproduce, and it's not furthering the white race or your race to engage in such behavior. But
yeah.
All right, well, I'll say we can go for another 5 minutes or so, perhaps on something not so serious, and then we'll put an end to this. But
no, I don't really have anything else myself. I'm probably going to get some dinner and then do a gaming stream myself.
Okay.
Finish up this one panel of my comic project and then post it on a few Discord servers. Ask people what they think of it, so forth.
Okay. Awesome. I'm again then just going to take a moment to. I talked about this early on in the stream, but and I probably will do a formal video announcement. But if everyone is not aware, YouTube just recently released another update to their terms of service, which now states that they reserve the right to remove channels that are not, quote, commercially viable, whatever that means. So I think effectively YouTube has gotten to the point where they've just straight up admitted we can delete your channel for any reason. And to be fair, good on YouTube for at least admitting it, because before they claim, we're open platform for the free sharing of ideas, but oh yeah, we get rid of our political ideas we disagree with. At least they're admitting, yeah, we're going to kick channels off for any reason now. But that being said, if you have not yet subscribed to me on BitTubers and BitChute, please do so. I'm probably going to start of my weekly videos. I'm probably going to start doing one video per month only on BitTubers and BitChute, because YouTube is I've seen how slow channel growth has been recently. I've obviously heard from many other YouTubers the same. It looks like YouTube is becoming less and less a viable platform for video sharing. So I'd rather shift my focus to a new platform. Right now, my two favorites being BitTubers and BitChute. But if anyone else knows of any other up-and-coming platforms they think I should check out, by all means, please do. And Cody Ferret, yes, you are free to DM me on Discord if you so desire.
I just want to annotate as well. DOJOP. He says he's paleoconservative, not alt-right, referring to Nick Fuentes. So just to clear that up in case any alt-righters go watching the stream. Anyway.
Okay, fair enough. Like I said, I know very little about him, so.
I do too. I know only that bit of information about him, about his beliefs in homosexuality and other sex rights. But anyway.
Okay. All right, Pipsqueak, you got anything else?
No, I don't have anything.
Okay. Tinseltown Queen, I see you're back. Unfortunately, we're about to put an end to the stream, so sorry about that. But this will not be the only Patrons Hangout stream this month. There will be at least one more, if not a third. I enjoy these very much. So thanks everybody for joining. If you're interested in getting in on these, the links to all it takes is $1 a month on Subscribestar, Patreon, or Bitbacker. To DarkCon and Pipsqueak, again, thank you so much for supporting my channel. I love you guys so much for it. And to all those that make my channel possible, thank you so much. And for everyone else, even $1 a month really helps out. And you can, of course, gives you more direct access to talk to discuss with me and take part in these streams. So please consider it if you at all like my content. And as always, that is my 2 cents. So take it for what it's worth.
Bye-bye, y'all.
And we'll see how long it takes for this stream to actually end, because StreamYard really sucks at actually ending when you hit the end button.
Yeah. I'll say you're welcome on the patronage, by the way.